All right. Red Nation, today we're going to be talking about resolution, just quickly comparing how does the spatial resolution of different imaging systems compare. You might question and say, I got this new CT scanner and this thing costs a lot more than my x-ray systems. I'm sure it has higher spatial resolution than my x-ray systems. Coming up here at How Radiology Works. And we've talked before about spatial resolution in x-ray and also how you measure it with the modulation transfer function. The higher spatial frequencies correspond to things that are smaller in the image, and we want to be able to tell apart small things in the image, such as a crack in the skull, for instance, or a microcalcification in the case of breast imaging. For these tasks, we talk about the spatial frequency. I'll draw a line, and if you remember, the units of spatial frequency are inversely proportional to distance units. Frequencies, how often that distance repeats. The units we can talk about are line pairs per millimeter. How many line pairs can you see, or repeated patterns? Typically, the pattern that we've shown before will look something like this, where you'll have a more attenuating region followed by a less attenuating region, and these are called line pairs. How many line pairs can we see per millimeter? On CT, with our standard CT imaging, where we're looking at soft tissue primarily, the types of reconstructions which are done for the vast majority of the reconstructions on a CT scanner, you're actually going to be way down here. If this is 1 line pair per millimeter, typically CT with the standard type kernel, a soft tissue type kernel, CT is down in here, somewhere around 0.6, 0.7 line pairs per millimeter. This is kind of the baseline for what we're going to be talking about for our resolution on X-ray imaging. There's modalities such as nuclear medicine modalities, which are much lower on spatial resolution even than CT. From an X-ray perspective, actually a standard CT image is one of your lower resolution images that you're going to have in a radiology department. On the other hand, we have talked about contrast resolution and low contrast detectability. We're able to see things side of the brain quite well actually on a CT scanner in comparison with just an X-ray. Even though it has a low spatial resolution, it doesn't mean it has a low value by any means. Then next in the scale would be fluoroscopy. Fluoroscopy is actually a low dose technique. We're actually sometimes doing things like averaging the pixels. Amongst our traditional projection X-ray imaging techniques, fluoroscopy actually typically has the lowest spatial resolution. Then next up, coming down to even higher spatial resolution, the newer CTs that are what's called photon-counting CTs. These inherently are having higher spatial resolution than a traditional CT. If you have one of those newer photon-counting CTs and you use a higher spatial resolution kernel, you can be getting in this range above 2 line pairs per millimeter. As well, on a digital subtraction angiography acquisition, you can be in this range as well of the 2 line pairs per millimeter. These can be taken on the same systems that do the fluoroscopy, but these are a higher dose acquisition where you're actually more concerned with the spatial resolution. You can be reading the images off at a higher matrix and getting a higher spatial resolution on your DSA. There also can be magnification modes, either optical in the case of a II, or electronic in the case of the flat panel system that can be used in DSA. Next, as you come down the line, you see radiography. This is the bread and butter of most X-ray departments. Radiography, you're going to be in this range from 3 to 5 line pairs per millimeter. And then finally, the systems that have the highest spatial resolution in all of traditional X-ray imaging is the mammography systems. These can be in the range above 5 line pairs per millimeter. We're talking about close to an order of magnitude more spatial resolution than your basic standard resolution kernel on a traditional CT scanner. Mammography has the advantage that you're looking at a small object. You can actually typically get a good amount of x-rays that are coming through on the exit, even at a relatively low radiation dose. And typically, mammography is where you will splurge for that higher resolution on your detector, because one of the tasks in mammography is looking at microcalcifications and being able to determine how many the orientation and being able to visualize these separate microcalcifications. If you didn't have adequate spatial resolution, they would actually blur together and you'd not be able to visualize them independently. That's how the spatial resolution stacks up amongst the different imaging modalities. Let me know in the comments below if you have other questions or things you'd like to see compared amongst the modalities. But having this just written out in a clear manner was helpful for me to be able to know that there is actually a significant difference in the resolution properties of the different X-ray systems that we have in a radiology department. See our video on the resolution in X-ray imaging coming up.